Hey guys, tonight we're sitting in the back of a medieval courtroom where the floor's dusty. The judge smells faintly of turnips, and there's a very guilty-looking pig wearing a rope harness and sniffing the bailiff's shoes. No, you're not dreaming. You're about to witness a real trial, one where the defendant oinks. Welcome to the glorious absurdity of a world that once tried animals in court with all the drama, pomp, and legal jargon usually reserved for barons and drunk millers. And just so you're fully prepared, you probably won't survive this. At least, not without second-hand embarrassment, a few giggles, and a deep sigh for humanity's past. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your city and local time in the comments so I know when and where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in a packed village hall that smells of old straw, warm people, and someone's nervous cheese. The wooden benches groan under the weight of curiosity. Everyone's here: the reeve, the baker, 3 children who snuck in, and a cow tied to a post outside just in case she's next. And in the center of it all, a pig in chains. She doesn't look dangerous, not particularly. Round, muddy, with one ear chewed and eyes that blink slowly, like she's seen too much. But according to the charges, she's killed a child. The town is certain. The parents are weeping. The priest is furious. The judge? He's already sweating, and the trial hasn't started. Now, you might think this is a dream. But no, animal trials were real, and they were no joke. In parts of medieval Europe, particularly France and Italy, pigs, cows, dogs, even insects and fish could be, and often were, put on trial for crimes ranging from theft to murder to demonic conspiracy. And they weren't just blamed and disposed of. They were formally prosecuted, with trials, lawyers, witnesses, and sometimes appeals. You shift on your bench as the scribe reads the charges aloud in a droning Latin that only the priest and possibly the pig pretend to understand. She's accused of biting a baby left unattended in a cradle. The child died. The villagers are outraged. The mother is trembling. And the pig? Well, she's chewing on the end of her rope, and clearly unaware her fate rests on the outcome of a theological debate about animal souls and moral agency. Historians still argue whether these trials were symbolic performances for justice, genuine attempts at legal consistency, or just communal rituals to process grief and blame. But whatever the theory, this pig is currently facing execution. The judge asks if the defendant has representation, and that's when it gets stranger. Because yes, she does. A lawyer stands. His robes are too fine for the room. His wig has seen better days, but his face is composed, and he bows with the kind of dignity usually reserved for royal court. He proceeds to argue, seriously, eloquently, and with multiple citations, that his client was acting out of hunger, not malice, and that the owner, who failed to properly pen her, bears the greater responsibility. You suppress a chuckle. The room does not, except the priest. He is not amused. He leans forward and declares the act not only criminal, but sinful. A beast without reason cannot sin, says the lawyer. Then why do we excommunicate rats? counters the priest. Yes, that's a thing. You'll see. The judge sighs. The pig snorts. The trial continues. You watch in fascinated horror as the town butcher is called to describe the bite marks. He tries, fumbling through nervous metaphors involving sausage. The child's aunt faints halfway through her testimony, and someone throws a garlic bulb at the pig, who is unimpressed. Eventually, the judge stands and declares the pig guilty. She is to be executed by hanging. The scribe writes it down. The villagers cheer. And the lawyer. He bows again, with a tragic little flourish. You step out into the cool air, dazed, stomach unsettled. You can't help but feel sorry. Not just for the pig, but for everyone in that room who needed this to mean something. Because when something terrible happens, like the death of a child, people need to blame, to punish, to purge. And sometimes, the only thing nearby with blood on its snout is a pig who wandered too close. Later that evening, you pass the gallows. They've already begun to build a smaller scaffold. You walk a little faster, because you suddenly remember the old tomcat back home scratched a friar last week. The next morning, you return to the same wooden courtroom, unsure whether you're more curious or just deeply invested in the fate of a goat rumored to have cursed a cabbage patch. But today, something feels different. The seats are fuller, the whispers are sharper, and the accused, well, she's wearing a garland. A sheep. Small, dirty, trembling, with bits of straw stuck to her flank. She's been led into the courtroom on a rope that seems more ceremonial than restraining. The garland of thistles and wildflowers, slightly wilted, was apparently the bailiff's idea. Some kind of token of mercy, or mockery. It's unclear. You take your usual seat. The same scribe is here. The same sour-faced priest. The same judge, who already looks like he regrets skipping breakfast. The sheep is accused of property damage, specifically trespass and consumption of blessed herbs in the bishop's private garden. And yes, that is being treated as sacrilege. The plaintiff, a monk with a haircut so uneven it looks like penance, is explaining in painful detail how the herbs were meant for ritual cleansing. He says the sheep's chewing broke a chain of spiritual hygiene that had taken weeks to prepare, and now the entire abbey smells of goat drool and fennel. The courtroom snickers. The priest does not. You shift in your seat, trying not to think too hard about the phrase, goat drool and fennel. The sheep's owner, a nervous-looking girl with chapped hands and a dress one size too large, stands beside her. She doesn't have a lawyer. She doesn't get one. The sheep is a property case, not a felony trial. No one's dying today. Still, the judge sighs and asks for the defense. The girl wrings her hands. She didn't know, she says. She's just a sheep. It's a valid point. But the monk counters with theology. All creation is accountable, he says. Or there is no order. You try to follow the argument. Something about divine law, responsibility, and the symbolic nature of chewing sacred time. The logic is thinner than broth, but the tone is deadly serious. Historians still argue whether animals were ever truly expected to understand the consequences of their actions, or if their trials were more about public ritual and maintaining cosmic balance. In this case, it feels like both, a courtroom trying to remind itself that it has power, even over bleating chaos. The sheep bleats. Loudly, the scribe jumps. The judge leans forward and asks if the animal has shown remorse. You stare at him, waiting for irony. None arrives. Instead, the girl nods. She stopped eating after I scolded her, she says, and she hasn't gone near the fence since. The monk scoffs. Out of fear, not repentance. The judge holds up a hand. He seems tired, as though debating a sheep's soul has unexpectedly aged him. He passes judgment. The sheep will be marked. Branded? No. Shamed. She is to wear a scrap of red cloth around her neck for 1 month, whenever grazing in communal fields, as a visible symbol of her transgression. A collar of shame. You blink. You half expect the sheep to protest. She does not. She sneezes. The courtroom murmurs. Some chuckle. The girl's face is red with embarrassment. The judge slams a wooden token on the table, thunk, and declares the case closed. The sheep is led out. The garland bounces. The girl trails behind, clutching the red cloth. Later, in the village square, you see them again. The cloth's already tied around the sheep's neck. Lopsided. Faded. People point. Children laugh. The sheep doesn't care. She's eating a turnip someone dropped. You wonder what the collar really punishes. The animal, or the owner. Because in the end, it's not about justice. It's about theater. The courtroom is a stage. The sheep is a prop. The monk is dramatic flair. And the shame? That's the ticket price. You walk home, the sound of bells and laughter trailing behind you. You pass a dog wearing a similar red cloth. You pause. It snarls at a pigeon. You nod politely and move along, because now you're learning. In this world, everyone might stand trial eventually. 2 legs or 4. Wool or skin. No one is safe from public opinion or its accessories. By now, you know the drill. Wooden benches, cold stone walls, an audience that's half fascinated, half asleep. You recognize faces. The scribe nods at you. The priest still glares like you personally insulted his incense. But today's defendant, it's a rooster, perched in a crate at the front of the room, feathers slightly ruffled, eyes sharp and defiant. He's not caged. He's contained, as if at any moment he might erupt into a defense of his own innocence in fluent Latin and a barrage of winged indignation. The charge? He laid an egg. That might sound like a delightful surprise for breakfast, except this is medieval Europe, and eggs laid by roosters are demonic. According to local law, a rooster's egg isn't just odd, it's a potential vessel for a basilisk. Yes, the mythical creature with a deadly stare, born from an unholy union of hubris and poultry. And now the townsfolk are terrified that this particular bird has opened a portal to hell in someone's cabbage patch. The courtroom is full today. Word has spread. A rooster accused of summoning dark forces. That's entertainment. Even the tavern keeper's here, still wearing his apron, flour dusted across his boots. The judge clears his throat. The crate creaks. The scribe begins to read the charges. His voice is flat, but the words? Unnatural act of laying, potential corruption of nature, violation of divine order. You suppress a laugh. The priest crosses himself. The rooster pecks the side of the crate. Then the defense speaks. Yes, this rooster has a lawyer. assigned by the town magistrate, because even in absurdity, the system must appear orderly. The lawyer, stoop-shouldered, with ink stains on his cuffs, argues that a single egg, unexplained though it may be, does not prove malice. It could be a mistake, a biological fluke, a neighbor's prank. He even suggests, quietly, that the egg was never actually laid by the rooster, that perhaps a chicken wandered by, dropped one, and the rooster took credit. This makes the courtroom murmur. The judge raises an eyebrow. The priest tightens his grip on his rosary. Then the herbalist stands to testify. She claims she saw the rooster straining over a nest of twigs, that she watched him lay, step away, and then, horrors, crow victoriously. Like Satan himself, she whispers. The scribe scribbles furiously. Historians still argue whether these stories were genuine expressions of fear, or just medieval memes gone too far, collective jokes that got trapped in the machinery of the legal system. But this room feels deadly serious. The judge asks to see the egg. It's brought forward on a pillow. The egg looks like an egg, small, slightly speckled, not glowing, not hissing, just sitting. The priest sprinkles it with holy water, half expecting it to crack open and reveal a lizard with a crown. Nothing happens. He sighs. Then the judge passes sentence. The rooster is to be burned, for the safety of the town, for the purity of the village, and possibly for show. You walk outside just as the rooster is carried away. No crowd follows, just the bailiff, the lawyer who looks emotionally exhausted, and the scribe still muttering about paltry jurisprudence. You visit the edge of the square that evening. The fire is small, controlled. You don't watch, but you hear the rooster crow once more, loud and clear, before the flames rise. Later, you pass the herbalist's store. She's selling tiny charms now, rooster warding coins, 1 copper apiece, guaranteed to protect against cursed eggs and barnyard heresy. You shake your head. Then you buy one, because the truth is, you don't really believe in rooster eggs hatching monsters. But after what you've seen, you're not taking any chances. You've stopped trying to explain things. At this point, if someone told you a goat was on trial for blasphemy, you'd just ask what time to be there. And sure enough, as you enter the courtroom this morning, damp boots squelching slightly on the packed earthen floor, you find that the defendant is a goat, a grey one, square pupils, a stare that feels vaguely judgmental. She's tied loosely to a post, chewing on her own lead. The charge: kicking the mayor's nephew in the knee and glancing suspiciously at the communion bread. The mayor is present, face redder than usual, and limping slightly for dramatic effect. His nephew sits behind him looking equally bruised and thoroughly embarrassed. You try not to smile. You fail. The judge, once again looking like he aged another year overnight, sighs heavily as the case begins. There's no lawyer this time. This isn't a capital offense, just a behavioral hearing. Still, the priest is here. So is the scribe, and a surprising number of townsfolk who brought snacks. The mayor speaks first. He says the goat charged at them unprovoked during an otherwise peaceful afternoon walk near the chapel, that she knocked his nephew over with malicious intent, nearly trampled his boots, and, most damningly, locked eyes with the communion basket in what he calls A moment of dark recognition. You wait for someone to laugh. No one does. Instead, the priest nods solemnly. You begin to wonder if the goat did know something. The mayor's testimony continues. He suggests the goat was possessed, possibly by a minor demon, possibly by the spirit of a former tax evader. The crowd murmurs. Then the goat bleats. Loud, startlingly loud. The mayor leaps backward. The scribe knocks over his inkpot. The priest fumbles his rosary. You bite your lip, because this is not how you pictured your life going. And yet, here you are, watching a goat stand accused of spiritual sabotage. The judge asks if there are any witnesses. A stable boy steps forward. He's about 11, covered in hay, and slightly cross-eyed. He claims the goat is mostly friendly, but admits she has opinions. She don't like the mayor's nephew, he says, or his hat. What kind of hat? The judge asks. Feathery. This apparently settles something. You're not sure what. Then, a curious shift. The priest rises and gives a brief sermonette about the long tradition of animals as spiritual symbols. Lambs for innocence, snakes for evil, goats for, well, ambiguity. He proposes a test. Not fire, not water, a bread test. They will place a piece of blessed communion bread in front of the goat. If she eats it, guilty. If she turns away, innocent. You glance around. Surely this is not. Oh no, it is. A deacon appears with a small basket. He approaches the goat. She eyes him. The room holds its breath. The bread is placed before her. She sniffs it. She sneezes, then walks away. The room erupts into chaotic, hushed awe. She refused it. Someone whispers. She knew it was sacred. Someone else gasps. The judge looks bewildered. The mayor scowls. The priest closes his eyes and murmurs a prayer of thanks. The judge clears his throat and rules the goat absolved. She is to be released immediately. The mayor is to recover with grace and humility. The goat is led out of the courtroom with what you swear is a smirk. Historians still argue whether animal trials were about enforcing laws or projecting human guilt onto the dumbfounded four-legged bystanders of daily life. Some say these cases were moments of moral theater, rituals that helped communities reinforce boundaries between the sacred and the mundane. You think of it differently. You think it's what happens when law meets superstition over a shared bowl of stew and runs out of reasonable suspects. That night, you see the goat again. She's in the field, tied to a peg, quietly munching clover. You walk past her. She stares at you. You nod. She nods back. It's possible you've just made an ally. You start keeping a mental tally. 2 pigs, 1 rooster, a sheep, and now a goat, with enough charges between them to fill a monk's ledger. And today, a cow. You arrive early this time. Curiosity has graduated to commitment. You bring a bit of stale bread, a cushion for the bench, and a resolve to stop being surprised. It doesn't help, because this cow, enormous, solemn, vaguely majestic, has a scribe. Not the usual court scribe, but her own. A monk, quill at the ready, documenting the proceedings on a scroll that looks suspiciously like it's been pre-written. The accusation: vandalism and sacrilege. Specifically, she wandered into the Abbey garden, knocked over a statue of St. Clotilde, and according to the friar's frantic testimony, chewed the edges of a sacred psalter, a holy book. You glance at the cow. She's chewing slowly, very slowly. Possibly something holy, possibly not. The judge appears late. Again, the priest is already in his seat, holding a sprig of rosemary like a weapon. The courtroom is quieter than usual today. Not solemn, just confused, because the cow, unlike the goat or the rooster, carries an aura, a presence. She was someone's ox's sister, a local milk legend, known for not stepping on children or carts. Her name is spoken with a mix of reverence and disbelief. Moret, the lawyer, yes, she has one, begins his argument with a flourish. Moret, he says, has no motive, no history of disruption. Her record is clean, her milk pure, and her eyes, as we all know, limpid with the innocence of unblemished intent. There is a pause. Even the scribe smiles, but the priest stands. He insists that intent is not the question. The act is what matters. Sacred property was damaged. A page from the Psalter was allegedly found soggy in Moret's cud. You look at her again. She blinks, chewing. Slowly. Then the debate begins. The monk scribe reads from his notes. On the 25th of March, as the bell tolled for none, the accused was observed entering the garden unaccompanied. Witnesses describe her gait as purposeful and her eyes as oddly determined. Oddly determined. The lawyer interrupts. Your Honor, that's interpretation, not observation. The judge sighs. The priest pushes on. The cow chose to chew the page with Psalm 22. This sparks a flutter of gasps. You have no idea what Psalm 22 says, but apparently it's a big deal. The lawyer asks if the cow read the page before chewing it. The courtroom goes still. It's a trap, a theological one. If they say yes, the cow has agency and guilt. If they say no, the act might still be sacrilege, but accidental. The judge hesitates. Historians still argue whether these animal trials were more about human guilt than beastly punishment. And moments like this, where grown men argue about the literacy of a cow, suggest it might have been both. Finally, the priest offers a compromise. Penance. Instead of execution or exile, Moret will be blessed, forgiven, and temporarily restricted from sacred grounds. She must wear a wreath of ash branches for 3 days and be guided by a human handler when near abbey walls. The judge accepts. The lawyer bows. And Moret, she shifts slightly, lets out a long sigh through her nose, and continues chewing. Later, you pass her on your way home. She's standing under a tree, ash wreath slightly lopsided, eyes calm as ever. Children are petting her nose. One of them asks if she's famous. She ate a book, says the other. You keep walking. You think of the words that once covered the chewed psalm, of the page, now gone, and of the way people need stories, how a chewed book becomes a crime, and a cow becomes a symbol. You wonder what Moret symbolizes. A warning, a miracle, or maybe just an afternoon the priest will never live down. You tell yourself you're going to skip this one. You've seen pigs hanged, goats shamed, cows accused of literacy. Surely that's enough medieval courtroom drama for one lifetime. And yet, you're back. Same wooden bench, same squeaky floorboards, same stale scent of cabbage and incense. But this time, there's no large beast in the room. No feathers. No hooves. No chewing. Just tension. And a small, flicking tail. Today's trial is for a donkey named Mathilda, whose only crime appears to be being seen. The bailiff reads the charge. Conspiracy to theft. Not actual theft. Just being there. Apparently, a group of local men robbed a traveling merchant last month, took his coin, his maps, and according to one account, his dignity. And in the retelling, Mathilda was present, tethered nearby, witnessed by all. But more than that, some are saying she brayed in support. The courtroom is packed. There's a tension in the air, because everyone knows the robbers. 3 local lads, dumb as fence posts and twice as loud, but they vanished, disappeared into the hills. Mathilda stayed. She was found tied to a post behind the tavern, chewing on a sock. And so, with no humans to put on trial, the town turned to her. You sit forward, intrigued, appalled, not surprised. The merchant stands now, indignant and red-faced. He claims the donkey watched him suffer, and her laughter echoed as if mocking. He insists she was part of it, maybe even trained. She kicked my cart, he says. She kicked me, says the blacksmith from the back row. She bit my apron, adds the tavern maid. This is spiraling. The judge rubs his temples. Then the priest stands, and of course suggests demonic influence. He says Mathilde's brain might not be laughter. It might be language, unholy speech, an incantation disguised as irritation. He mentions Balaam's donkey from the scriptures, the one that spoke. The courtroom stills. Because yes, people do remember that. The idea that a donkey could talk and choose to say nothing suddenly feels less absurd. The defense lawyer, bless him, still here, still trying, stands and explains, in great detail, the anatomical limitations of donkey vocal cords. He even draws a diagram. The priest counters with scripture. The lawyer responds with a sound impression. It is not flattering. You stifle a snort. Historians still argue whether trials like this were legal formalities or full-on performances for a community in need of distraction. Today feels like both. A town processing fear, absurdity, and the quiet thrill of blaming something present. The merchant demands punishment. The priest calls for penance. The judge rules that the donkey shall be watched closely by a designated handler. She is to wear a bell around her neck, a loud one, not as a symbol of shame, but as a signal, so everyone hears when she's near. So no more secrets, no more hidden brays. And, just to satisfy the priest, she must walk in a slow circle around the church every Sunday for 6 weeks. To cleanse her path, you watch as someone ties a large iron bell around her neck. It swings heavily. Mathilda looks unimpressed. As she's led out, the merchant glares. The tavern maid glares. The blacksmith waves vaguely as if unsure whether to forgive or flee. You step outside. The bell rings behind you. Clonk, 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 slow and steady. You walk alongside her for a bit. She doesn't acknowledge you. Then she brays. Loud, incredibly loud. You laugh, and for a second, you almost believe it was on purpose. You return 2 days later, though you told yourself you wouldn't. Again. But word spreads fast in towns like this, and the whispers were irresistible. They're hanging a pig. You arrive before sunrise. The square is already half full. Merchants have paused their wagons. Children are perched on barrels. The priest stands to the side, murmuring a psalm. And in the middle of it all, roped and muddy, flanked by 2 guards, stands the sow. She's big, black-bristled, one ear half missing, a jagged scar across her flank. You've seen this one before, not in the courtroom, but on the road. She used to belong to the miller, until the day she broke loose and attacked a child. The child didn't survive. No one's laughing today. No jokes. No mockery. Just silence. A raw stillness that settles into your bones like winter. The scaffold isn't high. Just a platform built from timber planks and haste. The rope is looped above, frayed slightly where someone tested the knot earlier. There's a stool for the judge, though he doesn't sit. The charges were read yesterday: murder, destruction of life, violation of Christian peace. The verdict was guilty. There was no lawyer this time, no appeal, just a rope. Historians still argue whether these executions were symbolic purges or genuine legal consequences. But when you see the crowd gathered, how tightly they watch, how no one speaks, you understand. This is penance, not for the pig, for the people. The executioner arrives. His face is covered, his hands gloved. He doesn't speak, just checks the knot, glances at the judge, and nods once. The pig grunts. She's not fighting. That's the part you can't stop noticing. She stands there, still, solid, as though she understands. A boy behind you starts crying. His mother doesn't shush him. She just holds him tighter. The priest steps forward and reads a blessing in Latin. Something about cleansing, justice, and the return to holy order. Then, without flourish, without delay, the rope is tightened. The pig's legs scramble. There's a thud, a creak, then silence again. And that's it. No speeches, no cheering, just a strange, collective exhale. The guards lower her slowly, lay her on a cart. The scribe notes something with shaking fingers. The priest steps aside. The judge leaves first. People follow quietly, one by one. You linger, not out of morbid curiosity, but because it feels wrong to walk away so quickly, like the moment deserves more. You walk toward the cart. She's still now, just a shape. You remember her differently, mud-slicked, stubborn, once barreling through the miller's yard with a stolen apple in her teeth. Today she's a lesson, but you're not sure what it teaches. Later that night, the tavern is quieter than usual. People speak in murmurs. The execution has turned into a sort of ghost, floating from table to table. No one says the word justice. No one says closure. You overhear one man say, "At least it's done." Another replies, "Is it?" You walk home through the dark streets, ears still echoing with the creak of that rope, and you wonder how long it will be before another animal stands trial, before another grief needs something to wear it. You pass the blacksmith's yard. A cat slinks across the path. You pause for just a second, then keep walking, because tomorrow the rooster might crow too loud, or the donkey might glare, and the courtroom will always be ready. The next trial is not held in the courtroom. It's in a field. You trudge out with the others at dawn, boots slick with dew, following the priest through a narrow lane between hedgerows humming with bees. There's no defendant tied to a post today. No braying, no hooves, no defense lawyer with his usual ink-splotched cuffs. Instead, there's a sea of movement in the grain. Mice, small, brown, and hundreds of them, swarming like spilled seeds across the parish's barley. They've chewed through sacks, burrowed into stores, nibbled the corners of documents, important ones, too. The villagers are furious. The harvest is thin already, and now it's being devoured. And so, naturally, the mice have been summoned to court. In absentia, of course. The priest stands at the edge of the field, holding a crucifix and a scroll. He begins reading, a formal excommunication. You're not sure who he expects to hear him, but he's using his full voice, the one he saves for Lent and stubborn demons. His Latin rolls out over the barley like thunder trying to scare ants. The villagers listen in reverent silence. The document outlines the charges: theft, destruction of holy grain, disturbing divine provision, and general disrespect of the boundaries between beasts and blessings. Then comes the curse. The priest declares, in the name of St. Cuthbert and all relevant celestial authorities, that the mice are hereby ordered to vacate the fields within 3 days, or else you lean in. Or else what? The priest says nothing further. Apparently, the threat is implied. Historians still argue whether these ecclesiastical trials were sincere efforts at divine pest control or elaborate, faith-soaked theater for desperate farmers. The line between blessing and legal order gets blurry in a world where mice are treated as moral trespassers. Still, this isn't just drama. These excommunications were recorded, witnessed, official. You glance around. The baker is taking notes, the blacksmith is nodding solemnly. A child sneezes. Somewhere in the stalks, a mouse squeaks. The priest waves his hands and sprinkles water over the ground. It doesn't seem to affect the mice. If anything, it startles them into another burrowing frenzy. But no one points that out, because this too is part of the ritual. You stand quietly, trying not to chuckle. Then you realize something. This trial is not for the mice. It's for the people. A collective action. A way to say, we did something. We appealed to higher powers. We named the wrong, even if it was small and furry and largely indifferent. After the priest finishes, the villagers begin scattering ashes around the perimeter of the field. A line of separation. Spiritual fencing. You help, because what else is there to do? You pour a trail of ash along a furrow, step by step. The mice do not leave. Not that day. Not the next. But after 3 days, they do seem fewer. Whether they left of their own volition, or because the cat population mysteriously tripled, is anyone's guess. But the villagers believe it worked. The priest says the mice heeded the summons. You shake your head, amused. Still, there's something comforting in the formality of it, in the way even the smallest mischief, gnawed grain, can be answered with robes, candles, and authority. You remember a time you spilled a whole barrel of flour and tried to blame it on a chicken. No trial, just a lecture and a broom. These mice, they got a priest and a parchment. You walk back through the lane as the sun rises higher, the smell of damp barley following you. A few mice dart across your path, unbothered, as if to say, "Thanks for the invite, but we'll stay a little longer." You nod at them. Can't blame them, really. The world is tough for everyone. Even rodents need a hearing sometimes. Today's courtroom smells like crushed lavender and stale judgment. There are no animals present, no ropes, no crates, just a wooden table with an empty chair, and in the air, the faint memory of wings, because the defendant, a swarm of locusts. You take your usual seat in the back, though it's hardly needed. Most of the village skipped this one. Maybe it felt too silly, even for them. Or maybe people don't like trials where the accused can't blink back at you. The scribe, however, is very serious. He's already writing, quill dancing across parchment, as if the insects will arrive and sign their names. The judge enters, robes slightly wrinkled, eyes deeply unenthused. The priest follows, carrying a censer that puffs out trails of smoke so thick you wonder if he's trying to choke a grasshopper hiding behind the bench. The charges are read aloud: deliberate defilement of crops, mass consumption without tithe, and refusal to disperse when warned. The wording matters, because apparently the locusts were warned. Last week, the priest stood in the field, robe flapping, holy water spraying, and read them a formal declaration of cease and desist 3 times, just in case they didn't understand Latin the first time. They did not leave. So today, they are summoned. A bell is rung. A bench is set aside for representatives. One woman coughs loudly and mumbles, "They're late." You don't laugh. Barely. Then comes the trial. The prosecutor, a red-faced steward of the grain supply, testifies that the swarm damaged 22 rows of barley, 16 of rye, and left droppings of an unnatural shape in the church garden. He gestures vaguely to a pouch, which you sincerely hope does not contain evidence. He argues that the swarm displayed an intelligence of movement, weaving through fields like it knew where to cause the most damage. "The devil's choreography," he mutters. The defense. Silence. The judge sighs. The priest stands to declare a general malediction, a formal banishment from the valley, from the food of the faithful, from the blessing of air and leaf and stem. He names them not as beasts, but as invaders, legal outsiders with no right to remain. You glance outside. It's a calm day, not a wing in sight. No buzzing, no fluttering, no dramatic gust of wind that might signify the verdict has spiritual backup. Just sunlight and distant bleating. Still, the judge rules. The swarm is found guilty. They are excommunicated, exiled, and warned that if they return, harsher punishments will follow, including the invocation of additional saints. The priest nods solemnly and offers a closing prayer in Latin that includes the phrase, "unrighteous eaters of seed." You leave the courtroom in quiet disbelief. Historians still argue whether trials of insects and swarms were allegorical rituals, or just expressions of medieval bureaucratic compulsion. Either way, today proved that even absence can be prosecuted. As you walk back into the village, you overhear a farmer mutter, "Worked last time." Another replies, "Might as well try something, because what else do you do when the wheat is shredded?" The skies turn black with wings, and nothing listens. You name it. You summon it. You give it a chair in the courtroom. And when it doesn't show up, you try it anyway. You walk past the fields. They are green, quiet. New sprouts peek from the soil like cautious thoughts. You bend down, run your hand through the dirt. No wings, no droppings, no plagues, just the chance of growth. You stand, brush your hands, and silently declare the swarm in contempt of court. You arrive late this time, not on purpose, just weary, somewhere between amused and numb. You never expected to become a regular in a courtroom where hoofbeats echo louder than logic. But today is different, not because of the accused, a dog, but because of the collar. You spot him right away, curled under the bench, tail twitching, brown fur speckled with dust. He's wearing a heavy iron ring around his neck. Attached to it a wooden placard, painted in shaky letters. I bite. The court is already in session. The scribe's voice drones through a list of minor infractions, barking at a bishop, lunging at a child, knocking over 3 baskets of plums. But the real charge, biting the reeve's son. The child's arm is bandaged. He looks more annoyed than injured. The dog, quiet, too quiet. You sit down and catch the end of the testimony. The reeve is red-faced, shouting about rabies and damnation. His wife weeps dramatically into a lace-edged kerchief. The priest listens grimly. The judge rubs his temples. Then comes the moment everyone's waiting for. The collar. A symbol, they say, of punishment. Not fatal. Not quite exile. But public shame. It's new. A recent custom, borrowed from another town. A way to mark animals that had sinned, but could not, or would not, be executed. They are made to wear signs of their guilt. The judge calls it a merciful judgment. You're not so sure. The dog is led forward. He doesn't resist. His eyes are glassy. The collar clinks softly with every step. Someone snorts from the back row. The judge doesn't notice. The verdict is read. He is to wear the shame collar for 1 month. During that time, he may not enter the market square or the church grounds. If he does, he will be dealt with accordingly. No one defines what accordingly means. The placard stays. You follow the dog outside. He sits on a stone step near the bakery, tongue lolling, the collar too big, the placard hanging crooked. A child tries to pet him. His mother pulls her back. That one bites, she whispers. The dog lowers his head. You sit beside him. You wonder what he remembers. The bite? The chaos after? The moment a room full of humans decided he was dangerous and marked him like a barrel of spoiled wine. Historians still argue whether shame collars were meaningful deterrents or just symbolic cruelty. But when you see the way villagers recoil, not out of fear, but reflex, you understand their real power. Shame doesn't need teeth. It just needs a sign, and the memory of someone else reading it. That night, you pass the tavern and see him again, still wearing it, still being stared at, still a dog. You buy a heel of bread, walk over, drop it gently. He doesn't move at first. Then slowly, he eats. No growl, no bark, just hunger. You wonder if he's the same dog who bit the boy. If something startled him. If the boy pulled his tail, if it mattered, probably not. The collar is on. And that's the thing about guilt. Once declared, it sticks. Even if it's silent, even if it never barked again. You don't plan on staying long today, but the smell hits you before you even round the chapel wall. Charred feathers, singed straw, and something else underneath. Something bitter and old. You say, another trial, another bird, but this time, not for theft, or mess, or bad behavior. Today's rooster stands accused of witchcraft. He's in a cage beside the altar, red comb askew, beady eyes full of the kind of indignation only poultry can truly perfect. He paces in tight circles, occasionally pecking the bars, which only makes the scribe flinch and the priest grip his staff harder. The charge, laying an egg. Again, but not just any egg. A round, pale, glossy egg with no yolk. Unnatural, the herbalist calls it. Too smooth, too perfect. She presents it like it's a cursed gemstone. Swears it trembled in her palm. Says it glowed slightly at dusk. The villagers nod like they've seen it too. No one mentions that she once tried to sell garlic as plague repellent for 3 pennies a braid. The judge enters late, visibly annoyed. The rooster crows, startling half the room. A woman makes the sign of the cross. The scribe spills his ink. You exhale. The trial begins. The priest delivers a lengthy statement about unnatural births, the demonic origins of mislaid eggs, and the old belief that a rooster's egg, if hatched by a toad under moonlight, will produce a basilisk, a serpent so evil that its gaze alone kills. You look at the cage. The rooster blinks. He does not look evil. But then again, neither did the miller's cat before it started hiding spoons. The lawyer, yes, the same one, is back, tired, but determined. He argues this rooster has been in the village for 4 years, has never laid anything before, and perhaps, just perhaps, someone else put the egg there. He dares to suggest a child's prank. The herbalist gasps. The priest's rosary beads snap from his fist and scatter across the floor. Silence. Then the judge speaks. Where is the egg? It's brought forward on a velvet cloth. Too dramatic for poultry, you suppress a laugh. No one else does. The judge leans in. He sniffs it. Someone coughs. He taps it gently. It doesn't crack. Then he rules. The egg shall be destroyed. The rooster shall be burned. You feel your stomach drop. This one feels different, unfair. The egg may be strange, maybe a hoax, but the rooster, he's just standing there. A few people cheer. Most don't. Later, at the edge of the square, the pyre is stacked too high for what's needed. The rooster is lashed to a post. The priest prays loudly. The herbalist hums. The lawyer stands with arms crossed, jaw set. The flames are lit, and the bird crows one last time. Loud, clear, defiant. The fire rises. The crowd disperses. That night, back in your room, you stare at your ceiling, wondering, not about the egg, but about the need to punish, the need to burn away confusion, to light something on fire just because it frightened you for a second. Historians still argue whether the rooster's egg was real, whether any ever hatched, whether the basilisk was real or if it was just fear. feathered and misunderstood. You roll over. The room is quiet, and in the dark, you almost think you hear a crow. Just once. Far away. Echoing. Not in fear, but in defiance. It rains all morning. You sit on the chapel steps, cloak pulled tight, watching fat drops pool in the muddy square. The bells are muffled. Even the birds are quiet. You think maybe, today, there won't be a trial. But of course there is. Word reaches you before noon. Another animal has been summoned. You drag yourself back to the hall, boots squelching with every step. This time, it's not a pig, or a goat, or a rooster. It's a cat. Not accused of killing or stealing, or knocking over a bishop's breakfast, but simply for being somewhere she shouldn't have been. Specifically, the altar. During Mass, the priest is furious. He claims she walked across the sacred table during the final blessing, flicked her tail at the chalice, and sat down on the gospel. You can't just sit on the gospel, he hisses. The courtroom today is half curious, half bored. It's been a long week. The same lawyer is here again, now visibly damp and clutching a cloth-wrapped bundle you suspect is his lunch. He looks like a man who would happily swap places with the cat. The cat, for her part, is not caged. She is curled on a small cushion at the front of the courtroom, purring softly, cleaning her paw. She looks thrilled to be here. The judge reads the charges in a tired voice. The priest demands ritual cleansing, or at least a week's exile. The baker suggests a day of fasting for all cats in solidarity. No one takes that seriously. The lawyer clears his throat. Your Honours, he says. The cat in question does not speak Latin, nor French, nor, it seems, care for ecclesiastical rank. She walked across the table because it was warm. A chuckle ripples through the room. The priest does not laugh. Warmth is not innocence, he says. You raise an eyebrow. The lawyer continues, describing the cat's long history of loitering, sleeping in rafters, and occasionally chasing mice during Vespers. She has served the church better than some deacons, he adds. The scribe stops writing for a moment, then decides to record that line anyway. Historians still argue whether cats in church were seen as protectors or pests. In some places, they were welcomed for mouse control. In others, feared for their association with witches. And when they strutted across sacred space, it became a kind of moral scandal. The judge ponders. The priest fumes. The cat yawns. Finally, a verdict. No malice, but grave irreverence. She is to wear a token of humility, a scrap of cloth tied to her tail for 3 days. Pink, if possible. Something soft. You hear someone snort behind you. The lawyer bows. The priest mutters a curse you don't think is entirely liturgical. The cat. She gets up, stretches, and wanders out the front door. No one stops her. Outside, the rain has slowed to a mist. You follow, stepping over puddles, watching the cat pad along the stone path, tail flicking. She doesn't look humiliated. She looks victorious. Back in your room, you imagine the scribe writing it up. The cat was tried. The cat was adorned. The cat departed on her own terms. You pour a mug of wine, set it beside the window, and for the first time in days, you laugh. Not because it's funny, but because the world is still strange enough to put a cat on trial, and the cat still doesn't care. The next village over has gone too far. You hear about it from a miller's apprentice. Mud on his boots, panic in his voice, shouting something about a goat in a cell. You assume he's speaking metaphorically. You are, as always, wrong. You arrive late. The trial is already over. But the goat, she's still in jail. You find her in the old stocks house, the one once used for petty thieves and drunkards. She's pacing in a straw-strewn pen behind iron bars that look suspiciously overbuilt for a creature who spends most of her time chewing fence posts. Someone has painted the words, "Convicted trespasser," on a wooden plaque nailed above the door. You blink. 3 days she's been in there, says the apprentice, for grazing on the wrong side of the hedge. You ask if it was an accident. He shrugs. Probably. But the land belongs to the Reeves cousin, and the cousin has opinions. You peer through the bars. The goat pauses, looks at you, blinks once, then resumes her slow pacing, one cloven foot at a time, like a monk walking circles in prayer. The building smells of old gilt and older mildew. Someone left a turnip in the corner. It's untouched. Outside, a signboard lists her sentence. 1 week incarceration, 2 days fasting, required display in village square. You are not sure which part is worse. You learn that in this town, animal punishment is a spectacle. They parade the convicted through the streets, attach bells, let children pelt them with soft bread. It's for the morale. Someone explains. You stare at them. You do not agree. Historians still argue whether towns that jailed animals were more theatrical or more legalistic. But seeing it now, you realize it's something stranger. Performance dressed up as justice. You walk the square that evening. There's a wooden cart in the center, empty but for ropes, and a sign that reads, "Parade at noon." You wonder if they made the sign before the trial. The goat is brought out at dawn. Her legs are bound, gently, decorated with ribbons. The children cheer. Some throw flowers, others pebbles. The Reeve watches from a balcony with a mug in hand. The cart circles the square once, twice, then a third time. No one speaks of the law, or of fairness, just of setting an example. Afterward, the goat is returned to her pen. Someone ties a daisy crown to her horns. You crouch nearby, watching her chew the rope off with surgical precision. You whisper, "You deserve better." She snorts. You leave before the afternoon rains start. Back in your own village, the talk spreads. They've heard what happened. Some laugh, some shake their heads. One old woman mutters, "Next, they'll be arresting sparrows for singing too early." You think of the goat, of her ribbons, of the bells ringing as the cart rolled through a cobbled street that didn't know whether to mourn or clap. That night, you write something down. You don't know if it's a complaint or a confession, just a sentence. We taught the animals to carry our guilt, and when they didn't understand, we punished them for not pretending. You fold the paper, slide it under the candle, and let it burn. You wake up certain you've seen it all, but the morning air smells like burnt oats and something vaguely theatrical, and that's never a good sign. At the market, whispers swirl like chimney smoke. They put a frog on the bench. The donkey was called as a witness. The judge asked if the rat had legal counsel. You walk faster. When you arrive, the door to the courtroom is open. It shouldn't be funny. It really shouldn't. but it is. Because there, standing in the middle of the room, is the judge, reading a sermon to a wooden chair, an empty one. The accused failed to appear. The defendant was a weasel. The charge, assault and theft. The victim, a merchant's chicken co-op. Dozens of hens, gone. Not just eggs, entire hens, snatched in the night, one by one. And the merchant is convinced he saw the culprit slink away under moonlight, tail twitching like it knew it had gotten away with something. But the weasel, unsurprisingly, did not report to court. So the trial goes ahead anyway. The judge declares the weasel in violation of natural and ecclesiastical order. The priest delivers a statement on the dangers of slyness. The scribe, bless him, keeps writing. There's no defendant, no advocate, no creature within 20 feet of the bench, but they proceed. Witnesses give statements. A child says he saw a blur. A farmer adds that he once saw a weasel with attitude. And then, of course, the defense, appointed by the court, because justice, as they insist, must be served even if no one hears it. The lawyer stands, clearing his throat. He does not object to the weasel's absence. Instead, he questions the reliability of the chicken's testimony. Dead silence. Then snorts. Then a full ripple of laughter from the back row. Even the judge cracks a smile before coughing into his sleeve and demanding silence. The lawyer proceeds, his voice steadier now. What is guilt? He says. If it cannot be proven, what is a crime? If the criminal cannot speak or be spoken to, you lean in, because now it's interesting, not because of the weasel, but because of the question underneath. Did they really believe any of this? Historians still argue whether these trials were theatre for the village, psychological ritual, or early experiments in the boundaries of legal philosophy. You sit watching grown men debate the ethical structure of intent for a rodent that's likely halfway to the next province. And yet, you see something else. They're not really putting the weasel on trial. They're putting their own helplessness there. The chickens are gone. The food is lost. The winter will be colder. So they name the thing that took from them. They speak to it, even if it's not there, especially if it's not there, because blaming the invisible, that's as old as fire. The trial ends. The sentence, banishment. The priest issues a formal edict. The weasel, should it be seen again, is to be chased from the parish boundaries with fire, bells, and holy water. You imagine the scene. Torch-wielding villagers screaming at a bush. It doesn't feel less serious because it's absurd. It feels more human. You leave the courtroom quietly. The wind picks up, a bird lands on the roof, stares at you, then flaps away. You think about that empty chair and how many things we've tried to punish by yelling at the place they should have been. You wake up to horns, not from a court summons, not a warning, just celebration. The village is bustling, bunting strung between windows, bread baking in every oven. Even the bell ringer is somehow early. It's St. Ulrich's Day. You almost forget there's a trial this afternoon. Almost. But by midday, the judge is in his chair. The scribe is sharpening his quill, and standing at the center of it all, wearing a chain of daisies around her neck and a ribbon on one horn, is a goat. She's accused of dancing with the devil. The official charge: midnight revelry, unnatural gait, and suspicious cloven hoofwork. You sit down, stunned, not by the goat, by the enthusiasm. This isn't a normal trial. This is ceremony. The priest enters dressed in his festival robes. The scribe hums as he writes. Even the judge seems lighter today. The crowd is buzzing, somewhere between reverence and theater. The goat shifts. She does walk oddly, high steps, tail flicks, turns like she's performing. A child giggles. An old woman murmurs a prayer. Someone throws a flower petal. The goat eats it. Then the baker's wife testifies. She says the goat appeared outside her window 3 nights ago, prancing in a tight circle on her hind legs. There was moonlight, she adds, and a flicker of red eyes in the trees. You suppress a smile. The judge nods solemnly. The herbalist steps forward next, swearing the goat has been seen frolicking with shadows, and that her milk tastes slightly haunted. They hush. Then comes the defense, and for once, it's not the usual lawyer. It's the fiddler. He stands up and says, "She's just a goat, but she dances when I play." And then he plays a slow, lilting tune, and the goat dances. She rises to her back legs, spins once, twice, dips. The crowd gasps, applauds, laughs. A child claps along. Even the judge smiles. Historians still argue whether accusations of animal dancing were taken seriously, or simply folded into village folklore like fairy circles and singing wells. But here, now, it's clear. This trial was never about guilt. It was about story, about letting the people see the strange and name it. The priest declares the goat suspicious, but charming. The judge rules that she must attend all future festivals and be blessed to ward off temptation. She is also to receive a new ribbon every season, preferably not red. The goat bows. Sort of. The fiddler leads her out, and just like that, it's over. You step outside into golden light. The square is alive. Bread, cider, songs. You see the goat dancing again, surrounded by children, crowned in flowers, and you feel something like peace, not because justice was done, but because, for once, no one needed it, because the world is strange, and people need ritual, need blame, need laughter, need goats that dance under moonlight, and roosters that maybe lay demonic eggs. You walk slowly past the courthouse, now quiet, past the stocks, past the empty chair from the weasel trial, past the oak tree where the first pig was sentenced. Past it all, you sit on a low stone wall and listen to bells, to laughter, to a goat skipping through clover with a daisy crown sliding over one eye. And you think maybe the trials weren't really about the animals at all. Maybe they were about the people who needed something to hold their fears, and something to let them go. Wind down. The sun begins to set across the crooked rooftops. You walk home slowly, lantern swinging gently from your hand, casting soft halos of gold over puddles and cobblestone. The village quiets in waves. Children drawn inside, shutters closed, bread cooling on windowsills. You pass the fields where sheep lie in quiet heaps, the orchard where birds nest in leaning branches, and the low path by the stream where frogs hum like old lullabies. You think of the goat, still dancing, maybe, of the rooster, the pig, the donkey, the cow. You think of empty chairs and full courtrooms, of stories that were strange, but never cruel, and you realize that somehow, in all its absurdity, the world made space for wonder, for talking about sorrow in the shape of a feather, for blaming mischief on hooves and paws and wings, because people were afraid of blaming each other. And as you close your door behind you, hang your cloak by the hearth, and settle into your chair, you feel the world soften around you. The air is warm, the candle flickers, and somewhere, not too far off, a goat with a ribbon trots under the moon. Let the past rest now. Let the courtroom go quiet. Let every creature be heard, and every fear, however strange, be put to bed. You've walked far today. You've listened closely. Now it's time to sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.